have another live stream. It's Thursday evening here in Seattle, and I'm about to sign off pretty soon to make dinner for the kids, or to switch out my partner pretty soon. But I just wanted to hop on real quick to kind of share about my story and how I'm starting this group coaching program. And maybe it's something that you can relate to. There's a point in my life where everyone thought that I was thriving. I do have a solid career and a partner that I really love, and 3 kids that honestly I've always dreamed of having. And yet every time someone said to me, are you ready to expand to the next level? Are you ready to maybe create a group practice? And this is something that ADHD people have been told a lot. You have a lot of potential. My honest internal response was, I literally can't imagine where that capacity to do anything would come from. Even when people ask me, what if your kids are begging for a dog or a cat? Would you consider adding a pet into your life? And my internal response right now even is, no, I can't imagine where that capacity would even come from. And not because I don't want to build up my career, not because I'm not ambitious. I'm very ambitious. Not because I didn't like what I did, but because everything felt like I was being maxed out. And if you ever feel deeply competent and quietly exhausted at the same time, this episode is for you. And this is why my story matters. I want to start by saying this very clearly. For a long time, I did not think I had a mental load problem. I was completely unaware of what mental load impact was. I knew what mental load was because I've seen social media stuff around it, but I did not think that problem was for me because my husband was really, really involved. I am really, really responsible. And I thought that I was just doing what needed to be done. And I thought this is what leadership looked like in the home and at work. And honestly, a lot of people benefited from that belief. I grew up in a very traditional home too, growing up. From a young age, I was considered a really, really good Asian child. I am the only child of my parents, and my parents had me in a really late age, but I had a lot of cousins that I was raised around, and we were constantly compared to each other and pitted against each other. And I was known as a really mature, obedient, someone who brought their family a lot of, good reputation. I was a kid who didn't cause trouble. I was someone who read the room really well and could really have great conversations with my aunts. And I anticipated the needs before they were spoken. So I was rewarded for that. And I learned early that being good meant being reliable. And so I'm really good at connecting. I'm really good at being an easy child and being the one who handles things. And that was very apparent when they kept telling me, wow, you raised such a good child. And I learned that without anyone ever telling me anything, that love was often conditional and based on competence. So when I say I fell into the mental load later in life, I really want to be honest. It wasn't a conscious agreement. It wasn't a conversation. It was just me living out my conditioning and me living out what I thought I needed to do without even consciously having a conversation about it. I learned how to be the person who is reading the feelings in the room, and I noticed shifts in emotions really sensitively and really intensely. And I learned how to anticipate negative feelings, and be the buffer. And I learned how to keep things running smoothly so nobody had to feel any discomfort. And that skill still lives with me now as a therapist. I also knew I wanted kids from a really young age. And that desire didn't come out of nowhere either. I had early caregiving tendencies, not just with my cousins or just my family, but emotionally with my parents. And if you're an adult, children of immigrants, you know that you grew up needing to fulfill some obligations that kids don't normally need to fulfill, like translating documents, picking up phone calls, being the liaison with school officials. And so when I became a parent with 3 kids, it felt really natural for me to become the default owner of the schedules, the emotional regulation, the school emails, the advocacy, the invisible tracking of everything. Not because my partner didn't care. In fact, he was raised the same way. He was raised, because he's Chinese American too, was raised to be the translator in his family and the social worker in his family. And it's interesting because he is very involved. And before we had the mental load redistribution conversation, it's not like he wasn't involved, but because I was trained my entire life to be the final safety net, I learned early on that I needed to step in and just fill the gaps. And here's the part that I didn't have language for back then, that I entered into a non-consensual agreement to hold the mental load. And no one asked me to sign up for it. My husband never forced me to do that, but I didn't know how not to do it. And overfunctioning for me felt like love, like leadership, like it was just the right thing to do. And that was what it was like to be a good parent. So pulling back feels and felt really dangerous. And I told myself the same thing many of you are probably telling yourself right now. This is just the season that I'm in as a parent of young kids. This is the reality. I am busy and the work is never ending. And that is a lie. It's, yes, we are in busy seasons, but so much of us are in unnecessarily busy seasons because of our over functioning. And so as a licensed mental health therapist, I worked with a lot of women. I still work with them who are in their mid-career, really established, many in their late 30s and 40s, highly capable, deeply committed parents, often partnered with deeply supportive, emotionally intelligent, loving spouses. And almost every single one of them was running up against the same wall over and over again. They were being asked to step into leadership, to expand their impact, to imagine more, and their bodies were saying no. Not because they weren't capable, but because there's absolutely no capacity left. And many of them told me, I think I need to quit. I just need to be a stay-home parent, or I'll just stay where I am and not get promoted, and I can't afford to want more. And that's when it hit me. It wasn't a confidence thing. It wasn't a mindset thing. It wasn't burnout in the traditional sense, but there was a structural issue with how the mental load was carried. And I knew that I had intel to do something about that. And these women weren't failing. They were holding entire systems together at home, at work, being on boards, being on extra ad hoc committees, going above and beyond for their friends, and really being their social worker for their kid. Many of us are parenting neurodivergent kids because we're neurodivergent ourselves. And many of us especially my clients in my private practice are parenting children of color in systems that were not built for them. And many are carrying legacy burdens tied to racism, immigration, class insecurity, and survival. And they have been conditioned to believe that if I lower my intensity, someone I love will pay the price. And no amount of self-care is going to solve that. I created this coaching practice, this coaching program, because I don't want to keep teaching women, A, how to delegate more, B, how to be more organized, or C, how to get their shit together and draw more boundaries. That is not helpful. And that's not what women need to hear or mental load owners need to hear. I this work is not about doing more work so you could build more capacity to handle more, or being calmer so nothing has to change, or convincing yourself that you're grateful enough, or delegating better. It's about interrupting the belief that you are the system. It's about turning inward without shame and noticing the parts of you that learned how to keep people safe. And it's about creating internal and relational safety to redistribute the load and not abandon your values. It's about making expansion in your career possible without sacrificing yourself or your children. So if you're listening to this and thinking, I don't know if this applies to me, I'm just doing what needs to be done, or this is just a busy season in my life, I want you to know that you don't have to decide anything today. Awareness about how your belief systems are guiding your decisions is the first opening. And sometimes the most radical thing you can do is to stop assuming that your exhaustion is a personal failure and start wondering whether or not it's the system that's asking too much of you, which it is. The system is asking too much of us. And we have a non-consensual agreement with the system that we'll take on extra. And it's not like our partners don't want to take extra on or the mental load on. We just fell into it this way. This is how the system wants us to operate. And so I'm inviting you to interrupt that and to build a new system. But first, it starts with awareness. I hope this is helpful, and I look forward to potentially seeing you in the future live streams. Bye.